My name is Inez de Brauw and I'm a 2024 artist resident at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. Just before coming here, I did a series on historical revisionism. So I had quite some paintings that I found of 1640, painted by Teniers the Younger, and he did all these gallery paintings. So a lot of paintings within paintings, and I repainted them, bringing out stuff I found interesting and taking stuff away that I didn't find interesting. And it led me to this idea of personally revising paintings. Coming from this age and background and culture, what do I want to see represented and what do I not want to see represented? And I think also these gallery or museum settings represent a kind of power structure. Most of those artworks have like strong female presence. I tend to be drawn towards these paintings. So here you see a nymph party in the woods, like a trippy party almost. The second layer, which is a museum structure, you see like a little bit of a space. That was a museum that we went to. So I'm trying to layer it as if the experience in the museum kind of opens your world up to these like dancing women. I painted interior advertisement for years. I was interested in trends through time and how they kind of changed, and then focusing on these objects that had different designs over time and then implying this movement with different materials. And now I'm doing these like museum settings that feel way more personal because I'm erasing certain people and then highlighting others. So it is kind of more personal than I'm used to working. This is kind of a drinking party with a very dominant male figure in the middle that I kind of wanted to get rid of. So I painted him first and then found him problematic or I didn't like him. So then he kind of went away. I normally paint what I struggle with. So these museums, these power structures, this European background, it's something I'm struggling with. It's about a love story, but it's also about this eerie feeling I have with them. And I think that gets represented back into the painting. The second thing is that it's also about memory. So I see, for instance, this woman sitting in a museum and then thinking about this painting. So it is a way of the transparency, as if the ideas are kind of floating through the air. So I think it's the memory element and this eerie feeling that you see. I think I'm just finding different ways to use color or to layer paintings. Starting with black instead of white is very helpful for me. And then also adding colors to the black is a way for me to start using colors without it being too overwhelming. And then the black gesso really gives me a way to include colors without seeing them too much. My process has changed here in the use of color. And also I have so much possibilities here. So there are so much different paints I could use, different ways of application I could use, and I'm learning about everything. So it makes me also realize that I should stay faithful to my own voice.
My name is Regina Jestrow, and I am a 2024 artist resident at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. Things that inspire and influence my work are quilt history and American quilt history, how different people use quilts in different ways. Very much connected with women's rights and political protests, and then just how people survived, how people memorialized other things that were going on in history. I use a lot of geometric symbolism that's connected to storytelling. The word quilt, I like it because it kind of connects me with the history and it helps me talk about the patterns I use. It helps me talk about the construction style I use. So it's like in one word, I explain a whole lot. I grew up with the sewing machine in the dining room. My mother made us all our Halloween costumes, our dress-up clothes. The sewing machine was always like the center of the house. So when I moved to Miami, I was 20 years old and I didn't feel like home until I bought myself a sewing machine. And sewing was always kind of part of my life, and now it's like everything I do. So I make textiles, I bring in reclaimed material, and everything is really like machine sewn, and I love using the sewing machine in my practice. I use a lot of sequins and shiny fabrics in my work, but when you're sewing sequins, they go pew, 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 and they fall everywhere, and they're on the floor, and it's you could, for days and days and days, there's sequins everywhere. I did some tests, kind of figuring out how to flatten them down. The glass bead gel is like amazing on the sequins. It's like, it makes them even shinier. These are the watercolor tests I did, and I sort of labeled everything, and then I put dots next to the ones that I liked the most. I've been doing a lot of work with like resists. So this is the absorbent ground and silver drawing fluid in one of these applicators. So I could draw like really narrow lines on here. And then after it dries, I apply all the color over top of it. Sometimes I start with a sketchbook, sometimes I start with research, either about quilt history or quilt patterns, or even I look at contemporary artists. Or I go to the thrift shop and I find the Gap had, in the 90s, made yellow corduroy everything. So sometimes it's the material that makes the piece, sometimes it's a pattern that makes a piece. The acrylics and the dyes are like way different. So what dyes do is they embed themselves into the cellular structure of the textile, and the acrylics kind of grab onto the cells. So you're gonna get two different type of textures. I am getting the color separation or splitting with the acrylics, but with the dyes, it's so much more of a surprise every single time. I like that better with the dyes. During the watercolor session with Kathy, she talked about densities and how colors split. I found that in the sepia kind of early on, but I didn't realize why. She showed us like different densities, different granulation. When you put granule and non-granule together, different things happen and different pigments kind of bounce off of each other when it's drying. So I made all these washes with either 2 or 3 different colors just to see how they would work. I think ultramarine blue is like super heavy, so it falls right down. The red kind of moves a lot. I've gained so much while here. I have not touched acrylic paint in like 5 or 6 years, because during the pandemic, I really got deep into textiles and sewing and trying to perfect the materials I use. Acrylics have become the next step.
My name is Omar Rodriguez-Graham, and I am a 2024 artist resident at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. I mainly work with oil paints. There's a lot of limitations with that, but it's a material that I'm very comfortable with. I know how to make it thick, how to loosen it up, how to layer it. Here at Golden, it's really interesting to be able to think about how some of those techniques, some of those ideas that I work with in my studio can be transferred into a different medium, which would be acrylics. David Alfaro Siqueiros spoke of this in the 40s of the past century, and he said that artists really need to work with the materials of their time. But I also think, how can you bring in new materials and technologies? Because in the end, be it a canvas or a brush, that's all technology. Oil paint was a technology. Before that, they didn't use oil paint. Being here, it's really interesting trying to understand what I can achieve with these materials that I'm not familiar with and I'm not comfortable with in the end. But that I'm sure some of them can replace and facilitate processes that already exist in my practice. And some other ones can create new avenues, of exploration within it. My whole process starts in digital. I'm doing these digital sketches. I realized that I do this kind of mess of painting, of sketch, and then I crop it back to this traditional space. And once I broke the format of the structure of the painting actually became like an object that coexists with us. That led me on this path of like, okay, I'm thinking about painting not as an illusion, but as something that exists. And so, since I'm working in a regular format, I'm bringing in a lot of like 3D milling technology, 3D CNC routers. And so these are tools of our time. One thing that I learned, I think in the pandemic, you need to stop taking yourself so seriously. It's about just enjoying playing. I mean, you start looking down the road and understanding how precarious our lives are. And I realized that I wasn't doing the things I wanted to do because I was waiting for the perfect situation. I had decided to do some things that were beyond my realm of comfort, but I achieved things that were really spectacular for myself. And fear of failure is tied to like waiting for the perfect moment. Because you're always thinking, if it's not perfect, it's not going to turn out. We have to remember that each painting, each act, everything you do, it adds up. Your history is told as a series of moments of actions. It's the same thing as a painting, A painting is accumulation of actions. That's the narrative that comes through. In the end, you know, life's about living it, about doing things. And if you fail, you know, you just pick yourself up and do the next one.